Historically, the Bahamas was understood to sit outside the hurricane belt. Of course, that was before we began to feel the effects of climate change. Recent devastating hurricanes have included Joaquin, which hit Long Island in 2015, Matthew, which hit the capital, Nassau, in 2016, and most tragically in September 2019, Hurricane Dorian, which destroyed entire communities on the islands of Abaco and Grand Bahama. I'm Nicolette Bethel, founder and festival director of Shakespeare in Paradise, a theater festival held in Nassau.
And I'm Philip Smith, formerly of the University of the Bahamas, now with Savannah College of Art and Design.
Shakespeare in Paradise was founded in 2009. It is the first and to date, the only international Shakespeare festival in the English-speaking Caribbean. Shakespeare in Paradise marries Shakespeare and the environment in some most unexpected ways. On Friday, October 5th, 2009, Shakespeare in Paradise presented its inaugural performance, The Tempest. This, we knew, was a risky venture. While some schools featured the predictable Romeo and Juliet, Julius Caesar, etc. on their syllabi, The Tempest was relatively unknown to students and teachers alike. But there was method in the madness. Two main principles lay beneath its selection. First, The Tempest had been used throughout the 20th century to present the central tropes of anti-colonial thinking. Prospero, the magician, the invader of the island, the savior, the civilizer, the teacher of language, the ruler, is an apt personification of the British in the colonies. And Caliban's very name suggests the Caribbean region. His strength is prodigious, his sexuality unruly and dangerous. Caliban has been associated with the people of the Caribbean by writers and directors from the 1940s to the present. Shakespeare is, for the Bahamian people, a sort of Prospero, a writer whose language we may be able to speak, but never to understand, whose art we might learn to appreciate only insofar as it reminds us how far we are from creating it. There are no Ariels among us. We use his language to curse. But that was not how we sold the idea of The Tempest to my fellow producers and directors. We sold the idea that The Tempest was the right play for the right place at the right time because it was about a hurricane. Shakespeare lived in a time of great political, social, and religious uncertainty. Shakespeare's England was threatened by multi-year famines during the 1590s, intermittent outbreaks of plague, and the possibility of civil war following the death of the childless Queen Elizabeth. It is inevitable then that Shakespeare's stage served as a means to play out these anxieties. Later, my collaborator, Phil Smith, will argue that our 2016 version of Macbeth found inadvertent expression for the trauma of a hurricane and its aftermath. I'm going to tell you that our whole existence is the expression, explicit and subliminal, of living against and amidst hurricanes. Phil's reading of The Blasted Heath lay bare some of the things that might have been functioning in our subconsciousness. When Philip Burrows met with his set designer, the artist John Cox, and told him he wanted bare trees, skeletal images to constitute Burnham Wood, he was not consciously thinking about the impact of Joaquin. We did not consciously make the link with the sea-blackened trees. But Philip Burrows' family is from Long Island. So is John Cox's wife's family. The devastation of Long Island after Joaquin was there, inevitably, in our unconsciousness. Hurricanes were present in our conscious minds when we mounted The Tempest in 2009. Residents of Nassau who had lived through Floyd and Michelle were treated to an audio description of what was happening in Grand Bahama in the fall of 2004, when radio producers stayed on the air even as their studio flooded. And so The Tempest was chosen to inaugurate our festival. It served two purposes. It opened our Bahamian dialogue with our colonizers, with our post-colonial present, and it allowed us to process our changing environment. This is the set of our version of The Tempest. I'd like to direct your attention to the darkening sky, the shape and angle of the clouds, and the lone tree, stripped bare of leaves and seeming to bend against the wind. We might contrast the image of an island presented here with William Moore Egley's 1850 painting, Prospero and Miranda. The painting, as you can see, offers an image of a sky and water in beautiful various shades of blue. The skies and waters that surround the islands of the Bahamas often are many shades of blue, but as anyone who lives here knows, they can also be dark.
The staging of the Tempest was not the first time that Shakespeare in Paradise engaged the theme of natural disaster. A year after Joachim came the performance of Macbeth. The last performance of the 2016 run occurred on Sunday, October 1st. Anyone who picked up a newspaper over the following days would have been greeted with news of another incoming storm. As the last performance of Macbeth took place, Bahamians were placing boards over their windows and buying tinned goods. 2 days later, Matthew, a Category 4 storm, tore through several Bahamian islands, including New Providence. Matthew uprooted trees, damaged infrastructure, blocked roads, and destroyed homes, leaving most of the island without power for weeks. These are photographs from the day after the hurricane, including photos taken outside the theatre. The storm cast a shadow not only over the events which had followed, but over the events which preceded it. While the staging of Macbeth did not seek to overtly anticipate or describe either the past destruction of Joachim or the coming disaster of Matthew, the two storms shaped the meaning of the 2016 staging of Macbeth. In its textual alterations and its set, the play rhymed with and obliquely described the trauma of natural disaster. The performance of Macbeth, drawing indirectly from earlier performances of The Tempest, found in Shakespeare an appropriate means to describe and anticipate disaster. In addition to embodying many of the anxieties of Shakespeare's age, Macbeth has a perhaps unearned reputation for anticipating or even causing disaster. In 1898, Max Beerbohm claimed that biographer John Aubrey and the diarist Samuel Pepys both recorded examples of actors playing in Macbeth becoming mysteriously sick. Both anecdotes were fictional, and yet Beerbohm's assertion that Macbeth brings disaster has gained considerable purchase within theatre communities. Even in the Bahamas, the 3 years in which Macbeth has been performed were years which brought hurricanes to the capital. Michelle in 2001, Francis and Jean in 2004, and Matthew in 2016. Macbeth then, in both its inception and its stage mythology, has disaster in its DNA. The Shakespeare in Paradise performance of Macbeth drew upon the recurring apocalyptic themes found in Shakespeare and the mythology which surrounds the play. It foreshadowed the coming hurricane and was haunted by Joachim. One area in which the apocalyptic tone of the play seemed to describe the post-hurricane experience was in its staging of trauma. A trauma victim often feels that their experience refuses to remain in the past, that, like Banquo's ghost, it erupts unexpected and uninvited into their consciousness. These signs of trauma shot through the performance, in which the past, like the moment of trauma, threatens constantly to infringe upon the present. The change in location from Inverness to Long Island offered an appropriately blasted heath for the play's setting. The upstage and downstage were divided by a screen, behind which were placed leafless, seemingly dead trees. These stripped and uprooted trees, separated from the action of the play, provided seats for the Weird Sisters and Banquo's ghost. Often, as in the scene in which Macbeth saw Banquo sitting at his table, this ethereal space seemed to exist only in Macbeth's mind. These dead trees belonged, in other words, to a place which pushes against consciousness, occupied by things dead and otherworldly. Perhaps appropriately, as a resident of Long Island, Macbeth found that the violence of the storm, like the violence of his own deeds, is not consigned to the past or future, but erupts into the present. In a characteristic both of the trauma narrative and the forward-backwardness of Shakespearean apocalypse, the moment of trauma refused for Macbeth to remain consigned to the moment of its occurrence. The play also returns Macbeth and brings him forward to the moment before the storm, when the witches tell Macbeth that he shall never be vanquished, he shall never vanquished be until great Burnham Wood to high Dunstanny Hill shall come against him. He replies, that will never be. In this staging, Macbeth, exhausted by anxiety, sank to the floor with laughter. The idea that a wood might uproot itself seemed impossible. Like Macbeth, many residents of the Bahamas did not anticipate what was to come, and for many, their lack of foresight became embroiled in the trauma of the event itself. The trees of Long Island, both in the diegesis of the play and the 2015 storm, did move, just as the trees of Nassau would in the days to follow the performance.
In the Caribbean, Shakespeare has, at different times and in different contexts, been an instrument of colonization, a channel for resistance, and a partner in a creative dialogue. In the same way, too, Shakespeare may be one way in which to engage with the uncertainty that climate change brings today. In this paper, we have sought to show that the Shakespeare in Paradise performances of The Tempest and Macbeth found inadvertent expression for the trauma of a hurricane and its aftermath. The performances encircled and rhymed with the experience of living through and living after a natural disaster. Shakespeare in Paradise continues to engage unavoidably with the environment. Our festival takes place in the last week of September and the first week of October of every year, except for 2020, when COVID-19 made us virtual. These months are the peak of the Bahamian hurricane season. Though hurricanes do pass through in July and August, they seem to strike with greater frequency in September. And historically, the worst ones hit in September and October. Francis, Jean, Joaquin, Matthew, Irma, Dorian. Small wonder we see hurricane trauma on our stage. It is there for us all the time.
Hello, I'm Paul Moss, and I am one of the producers and artistic directors for the Handlebards.
And I am Tom Dixon, the other producer and co-artistic director of the Handlebards.
So the company started in 2013 as an all-male troupe, just 4 actors. And here's the rub, we were cycling everywhere from venue to venue, carrying everything for the shows on the back of our bicycles, hence the term Handlebards. So when we're in the UK, all of our shows start as a cycle tour. So each summer we typically put on 2 tours, starting in London and ending up in Scotland, cycling about 1,500 miles each tour and carrying everything for the tour on the back of bikes, as you can see here. We also use a lot of bike related stuff in the show. So if you look at Bottom's helmet there, that's a bicycle seat as his nose and some tires as his ears. And so we're constantly recycling all the bike related paraphernalia into our shows and recycling props and costumes as we go.
So what is good sustainability? But back in 2014 was the first time that we won the Fringe Sustainable Practice Award. And what they say good sustainability is being ecologically and economically sustainable whilst maintaining artistic excellence. And I think that's a really good description, really, and it's one that we stand by. So the reason that we kind of been nominated for these awards is because of it's less to do specifically with the show that we put on, which we always keep entertaining and light. It's more to do with everything else that goes on around that. So who are we peddling sustainability to? We think it is to our creative teams who work on the shows with us, the venues that we go to, the audiences that come to our shows, and other artists who might hear about us and see us across social media and things like that. So what we believe is that self-imposed restrictions and limitations can lead to innovation and creative ways of thinking. It's easy to just go with the status quo, to do what everyone does, and to put a tour in a van, but we don't think that would necessarily lead to creative thinking. So starting with the creative team, a limitation that we put on them is that all the set, props, and costume have to be able to fit into 245-litre boxes. And this is because we're cycling from venue to venue, so the actors need to be able to carry it. If it's any more, then they won't be able to carry it from show to show. And so they won't get to venues on time for the show. And so this limits the director and the designer in terms of what they can use in the show. And we think it makes them act creatively. They start using costumes for 2 different characters. We've had jackets that go inside out for a different character, things that come together, different people's costumes that come together to make a puppet. And here it is, the setup. This was back in 2015. Those two boxes are then attached to the back of the bikes, and we cycle along with them. And that's a picture of me. And what we don't usually tell people is actually that picture's been photoshopped, and I was actually putting the finger up at Callum, who was photographing me, because he chose to take a picture rather than help me push the trailer up the hill. And it's a good example of how it isn't all rose tinted and sort of sunshine cycling trips when we're doing this. It is hard work to be sustainable, but we think it's worth it. And another limitation that we put on the creative team, I think an obvious one perhaps, is that as much as possible, the set props and costume have to be repurposed, recycled, or from secondhand stores. And an obvious reason for this is, we say, because we care about an environmental impact, but then, secondary, we have a limited budget. And then something we're keen to do, I think, is at the end of sort of the shelf life of the set props and costume, is to make sure we recycle as much as we can, give back to secondhand stores what is sort of usable, and to have as limited amount of stuff as possible just be dumped. And so again, limitation leads to innovation. When we toured with Midsummer Night's Dream, we had this bicycle powered set. So we teamed up with Electric Pedals, who are a London-based bicycle company who do bicycle powered cinemas, and they created a dynamo for us, which meant that when we cycled, we created electricity, and that electricity turned the bike wheels, which then moved set pieces around the set. That kind of thing we would never have thought of doing that were it not for the limitation we put on ourselves of having to cycle things everywhere.
So there's also a lot of creativity on the sort of logistical and production side of it as well. So we have a lot of interesting conversations with venues, because we do have to work in a very different way to a lot of companies. Now, obviously, the big limitation for us is that we can only really travel about 30 miles a day, because we have to cycle. So we're carrying probably about 40 kilograms worth of set props and costume alongside all of our personal stuff. But that does mean as well, we have to be quite imaginative and innovative in the sort of venues we perform in. So it's not just theatres, it's not just castles and gardens and stately homes. The image you can see here is of a bike yard in Sheffield, where we pitched up in our first year, in fact, and have been performing ever since. So much so that they've now built an amphitheatre in that space in order to accommodate more performances. So venues, it's working with venues that may not have hosted theatre before, and working with them to work out how they can put these events on. But overall, what it means is that we really diversify our audience, because we're able to take theatre to places that aren't traditionally theatrical. So because we're only traveling 30 miles a day, we end up rocking up into pub gardens or bike yards or private gardens, or sometimes it'll be a town hall or that sort of thing. And it means that we end up reaching audiences that don't necessarily have a theatre in their local area. And sometimes, as you can see from this photo, we also get the audience involved in the cycling, and we take them to a venue that they may not have actually experienced before.
There are obviously limitations to the limitations you can put on yourself. One of the things that we've realized over the years is obviously the welfare of company members is important. And in our first years, when it was just us, we were camping everywhere we went. So practically, we've probably had our lowest carbon footprint in our first few years, but realistically, you need to consider the welfare of your company. They're cycling 30 miles a day and performing a show at the end of most evenings. They need to stay in a reasonable, a hotel with a shower and a good bed. And so, yes, carbon is going to go up, but there has to be a baseline of carbon, I think, for when considering your company's welfare.
Yeah, everything is carbon as well. So the reason we were able to keep ourselves sustainable as a company is because we would travel internationally when the winters here were too cold for us to do outdoor Shakespeares. So here's a picture of us doing A Midsummer Night's Dream in Gardens by the Bay in Singapore. So we were able to keep the company afloat by doing big, highly paid gigs in Europe, in America, in Asia, and yeah, that did cost carbon. And we're now working out how we can still maintain those audiences internationally and maintain that reputation, but doing it in a much lower carbon way.
Some of the ways that we've started thinking about that is we've teamed up with Equilibrium, who predominantly work with sort of music festivals and musicians that tour. And I think we're one of the first theatre companies to work with them. But we tell them how many miles we've traveled, either that's through the UK or if we were doing an international tour, how many miles we've flown. And they come back to us with a quote of how much we need to give in order to offset. Now, we're aware of the limitations of offsetting. It isn't the best practice, but we think it should be a baseline that you should be offsetting your miles, but probably offset double as just a practical baseline. That's something that we should all be doing in terms of giving to sort of tree planting or to wind farms and things like that. There's also the Arden Project, which is something that we've been working on in Sheffield, which is basically going to see itself as a theatre made of trees using a technique called biobotanics. But I think there's a whole other talk about that. That's quite a big project that we're working on. But this came from us just thinking that not only should we offset through other companies, but we should also think about how we can offset as well. Where can we plant trees? How can we work with communities in order to sort of give back to, in a planetary sense? It's not just about offsetting carbon, it's also about giving back on a community level.
So we're sort of secret activists, I suppose. Even though we're performing light-hearted Shakespeare around the country and around the world, there's always an environmental message behind it. So we do use our channels, we use our social media and our website to really forward those things. So our more engaged audiences we are having conversations with them all the time about how we and they can be more sustainable. And likewise, we work with a lot of people in sort of academia. So we've been a part of Julie Hudson's book, The Environment on Stage, Scenery or Cultural Shapeshifter. And we're also part of the Atmospheric Theatre sort of conference, I suppose it is, with Chloe and Evelyn from University of Exeter. So thank you very much for joining us. We are happy to answer any and all questions. So yeah, thank you very much for having us, Globe for Globe.
My name is Katie Brokaw, and I'm co-founder with Paul Prescott of Shakespearean Yosemite. So there's lots we could say about our approach to text and the dramaturgy of place, but in this short video, we want to concentrate on the collaborative dynamics of this project and its aim to nurture the next generation of eco-activists and Shakespearean practitioners. As such, I'm joined by 4 collaborators: UC Merced alumnus Angel Nunez, UC Merced alumna and National Park Service employee Jess Rivas, and UC Merced students Sophia Andam and Kat Flores, and we'll all be talking about the work that we do. First, some quick context. I teach and direct Shakespearean Yosemite as a faculty member at UC Merced, which opened its doors in 2005 as the 10th campus of the University of California. Our current student body demographically reflects the future of the state. Students are 90% people of color, 57% of them identify as Latinx, and 75% are the first in their family to attend university. Our campus was intentionally placed in the underserved San Joaquin Valley of California, 2 hours west of Yosemite National Park. This highly agricultural part of the valley faces some of the country's worst environmental injustices. It has the worst pollution in the country, high cancer rates due to pesticide exposure, persistent water problems, and of course, the valley and Yosemite and the Sierras are suffering from an increasingly long and devastating fire season. In response to these contexts, we founded Shakespearean Yosemite in 2017 to offer free, outdoor, site-specific adaptations of Shakespeare's plays every Earth Day in collaboration with the National Park Service. We work with students, park rangers, scientists, and community members to adapt, create, perform, and evaluate these productions. We had about 1,000 people at our most successful production, our 2018 Midsummer Night's Dream, with audience members who were a combination of people who came to the park just for the performance and hikers who happened to stumble upon it as they were walking through the woods. Each of our productions is 90 minutes long, full of live music, and heavily adapted to highlight a particular ecological issue, from plastic pollution to the ecological importance of trees. We see Shakespeare as an open access and infinitely renewable cultural resource. Unlike fossil fuels or animal species, Shakespearean texts are adaptable, inexhaustible, and invulnerable. Angel Nunez will now talk about some of our recent adaptations.
Thank you. So recently, prior to this latest production in 2019, I was Sylvius, the firefighter in As You Like It. a production for which I also worked on some Spanish language translations. After taking that COVID hiatus in spring of 2020, this spring, we were able to safely film Imogen in the Wild, which will be released free on YouTube as part of the Cymbeline and in the Anthropocene project, which you'll hear Randall talk about tomorrow. In this production, I play Arviragus, and I also worked as an associate production manager and boom operator, which I find always quite interestingly, looking back on that I was not expecting to take on so many roles, but I showed up on set one day and I volunteered to work the boom mic. And I think that's one of the many aspects that highlights the fascinating collaborative nature of Shakespearean Yosemite productions. So Imogen in the Wild highlights not only the ecological catastrophes of land abuse, but also the environmental injustices that disproportionately hurt poor people and people of color. My experiences with Shakespeare actually stem from participating with Shakespearean Yosemite, which to me has made reading and performing Shakespeare a lot more enjoyable and accessible. Having recently worked with language and Shakespeare, I've experienced those benefits of site-specific adaptations when using Shakespeare's text and putting it through a lens, in this case, an ecological lens, to highlight environmental issues. The Imogen in the Wild film is being co-created with a team of almost 50 artists, most of them UC Merced graduates and students who are either acting, writing, composing music, film editing, and designing. The companies bring together also professionals like Lisa Volpe, founder of the Los Angeles Women's Shakespeare Company, and Devon Glover, aka the Sonnet Man, Brooklyn-based hip-hop artist and educator. We also get to collaborate with a handful of National Park Service employees who are both consulting on the film and acting in it. One of those is our very own Jess Rivas.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me to be part of this, Dr. Brokaw. So I've been in 2 live performances of Shakespeare in Yosemite, playing Snout the Wilderness Ranger in the 2018 adaptation of Midsummer Night's Dream, and then Audrey the Ranger in 2019's As You Like It in 2017. And then this year I got to play Ranger Lucia in the Imogen in the Wild film. And one thing that just as a Park Service employee that the park appreciates about this connection of Shakespeare and the climate and addressing some of these issues that we're facing and observations that we're making in the climate is being able to connect the changes that we see in our environment and the observation of the changing climate and the way that it's affecting not only us, but future generations as well. And as a Park Service employee, our mission really is about protecting these places for us today, but also for future generations. And, you know, as an employee, we work in the federal government. There was a point in the previous administration where we couldn't even really talk about climate change. And so being able to bring people together over observations that became very politicized and very polarizing was one path forward to allow people to come together, view these observations, and feel part of the solution. The thing that I connect with personally about this project is being able to see people represented in their national parks and people feeling at home in these places. One experience that stands out to me is being able to work with Devon Glover, who is the Sonnet Man. And I remember working with him a few years ago, and in his first trips to the park, he didn't feel very connected. He didn't feel at home. He shared sentiments of just feeling like the place was very foreign to him. So he had never visited these places. And it was something I related to because I didn't go to parks until I was 18 years old. And by the end of the 3rd year of the production together, I remember we were standing backstage and we saw a bear, and then we saw a bobcat, and Devon and I were just witnessing all of this amazing nature just doing its thing in front of us. And he had turned to me and said that he understood, and he got it. He understood why these places were important. And now he's currently working on a project to bring people together, bring communities together and introduce them to their national parks through rap and through music and through art. And so to me, when I think about the future generation of these places, when I think about who these places belong to and the few people who have access to these places, I think that a production like this is one way to reach audiences and allow them the connection to these places and make them feel at home in the places that belong to them. And so I'll turn it over to UC Merced Junior Kat Flores, who greatly enhanced these productions with her original music.
Thank you, Jess. So audience surveys for our productions reveal that music is a big part of the success of the production, both in terms of people's enjoyment and their ability to really comprehend the show's ecological messages. So in 2019, I worked on As You Like It as a guitarist and singer for the production. And performing music on Yosemite's open air stage really allowed me to truly connect with live audiences while singing songs such as After the Gold Rush by Neil Young. And in 2021, I composed and performed 2 original eco anthems for Imogen in the Wild, which highlight the film's focus on environmental justice. One of them is inspired by Titania's climate change speech and appears in Set the Film as an eco-activist video, inspiring Imogen to take action against the destruction of the land that is being approved by her father, Merced. So working on music has proven that lyrics are a powerful tool for emphasizing ecological awareness. An example of a lyrical phrase that will debut in my original eco anthem, Earth's Cry, is as follows. And when the spring and summer fall into each other, the world suddenly goes cold. So this musical phrase can have a lasting impact on audiences' awareness towards climate change. Music is a form of activism that transcends the constructs of academia and scholarly pursuits. Instead, it focuses on creating an emotional response in audience members to realize that we are the solution to the issues of climate change and ecological destruction. So I also get to work with talented performer, my classmate, Sophia Andam.
Wow, thank you, Kat. And hi, hello, everyone. Yes, my name is Sophia Andam, and I played Imogen in Imogen in the Wild. Preparing for this role has taught me so many things, not only about Shakespeare and the environment, but about the importance of theater meshing these very 2 important figures together. Yes, we are working on the play Cymbeline, but with our play taking place in both Merced and Yosemite National Park, we acknowledge the weight preservation and sustainability play in these 2 environments. As much as the play Cymbeline focuses on Imogen's relationships with Cloten, Iachimo, her husband, as well as other aggressors, it's important to recognize that she escapes and goes into the wild, Wales in Shakespeare and Yosemite in our version. And within the wild, she adapts an appreciation for nature and participates in the fight to save the wild. And she learned that saving the wild is saving ourselves. We humans depend on the ecosystems of the wild and need them to survive. And in my opinion, and I think my classmates would agree, that there was no better place to make a film with an ecological message than in Yosemite National Park. We use theater in Yosemite as both a tool and a visual aid to help the audience see the beauty in wild nature, see the amazing relationships that can be created and restored while in nature. And with that, hopefully it will make people then want to save nature and save humanity too.
We're so lucky to get to work with people like Angel, Jess, Kat, and Sophia. That's what theater is all about. Indeed, the making of collaborative, community-based art is itself a part of our message, for it will take collaborations of scientists and artists, students and professionals, local activists and worldwide visitors to preserve and restore the habitable environments in iconic places like Yosemite and in the corners of the world where we live.
The Willow Globe is an open-air theatre planted entirely of living willow. A scaled-down version of Shakespeare's Globe, it nestles surprisingly and rather magically in a field on a small organic farm in the Upper Wye Valley in mid-Wales. Its season runs from April to September, and it welcomes all comers to enjoy its leafy intimacy.
We are at one with the environment here and try to be as eco-friendly as we can be. For example, a small wind turbine and solar panels power all the electricity on site. And being open air, we don't need much to sustain our activities. The willow itself dictates how we work.
It's just been pruned. The willow shoots 20 to 25-foot rods every year, getting greener and shaggier through the season. In May, you can see Malcolm's army marching outside towards Dunsinane, Duke Senior's lords on their hunt. By August, the leaves will be dense and become opaque, offering a wonderful acoustic and visual variation.
Weather and place dictate everything. You have to be alive to the moment. Wind, birds, sheep. It's a challenge. You're in touch with the spirit of the place. You reflect the moment. We hold, as 'twere, the mirror up to nature, and magic. Magic happens. We were very lucky when we were younger in that things weren't so prescribed as they are now, weren't we? And you could be very free with where you were going and what you were doing. And working up here in the fields, I mean, that's part of the whole excitement for me, of working here now in mid-Wales, is that people come up the back track and, can't believe it that they're suddenly listening to Shakespeare in the middle of a field, and that's just very liberating. Costumes must be resilient to wind and weather. Volunteers led by a professional theatre designer are working on this year's production of Cymbeline, using local natural fleeces. And the old farm stable now hosts workshops, winter rehearsals and wardrobe.
I wanted to explore different worlds. I got close, but not close enough. I was tired, so tired. My soul is
Young people come to work with Shakespeare in nature. Following the teacher, they all get lost, but the magical flower helps them find their way home.
I think we're totally lost. And I'm really worried because we've got double maths later, haven't we?
This is relational here.
No, but no, you don't know this, but Mr. Sherman still beats the teachers. He doesn't beat the kids anymore. And I'm really scared. Yeah, no, really, that's right. And I'm still scared and lost and worried.
Come on, sir. Cheer up. Here's a bar of solid.
Thanks, Jacob. You know what, Mr. Sherman? I will get us home, and I'm not scared of you.
With the Willow Globe at its heart, the whole place becomes imagination's canvas. Students working on Macbeth head for the cavern. There are tall trees and old stones. Witches live here. Witches' brooms are often made of willow, by the way. All week they'd been exploring the play with words, music and graphics. They'd made an apparition to come out of the cauldron.
Macbeth, 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 beware Macduff, beware the Thane of Fife, dismiss me, enough.
Our company, Shakespeare Link, had been a charity and nomadic for years. When we settled in Wales, we wanted to make work here. We filmed, we produced promenade performances. We needed a theatre. How? One of our trustees cracked the joke. You could always plant it in Willow.
Instinct kicked in. Willow grows fast, loves wet, it's wet in Wales. In the Celtic tree calendar, willow is the tree of magic and dreams, intuition. And we had a willow patch planted as part of an experimental biomass project. We ran with the ball.
We took advice for the best location, harvested willow, marked a footprint of the space, put the word out we were trying to plant a theatre. Volunteers started turning up. Arches took shape. We had to plant in a hurry. It was early spring, and once the willow started to sprout, it would be too busy growing leaves to have enough energy to root.
That trustees' meeting had been the 4th of March, 2006. By the 23rd of April, we celebrated with a party. Make me a willow cabin at your gate. Audience helping to plant fedges as they came in. To mask the fences built against marauding sheep. Simon's hurdy-gurdy and Viol's band. The fledgling willow concert. So 15th birthday today. What a journey.
Now, Willow Globe welcomes an eclectic mix of shows and events to a summer season, informed always by the weather. Local talent. Workshops. Music, school and family groups. Festivals.
Touring professional groups.
The Everyman Youth Theatre in their storm-tossed ship in the Tempest. But the rain, it often raineth every day, and showers can be prayed through, but real rain is always challenging. We used to scuttle to the old hay barn, a happy place, though its seating capacity is less than the theatre's, which was limiting. A few years ago, a lottery grant allowed us to buy a second-hand circus tent.
This wonderful, flexible space allows for all sorts. We remember the innovative factory theatre, bringing Timon of Athens. Terrible weather, and the actor playing Timon, in despair in the last act, running out to stand, Christ-like, on a bench in the teeming rain, his personal desert.
But when the weather's kind, the theatre simply always connects us to spirit, to each other, in the moment. During Lockdown 2020, the wonderful Wet Mariners lifted the spirits of a tiny socially distant audience with their comedy of errors.
Good Dr. Pinch! You are a conjurer. Establish him in his true sense again, and I will please you what you will demand.
Alas! How sharp and how fiery he looks! Mark how he trembles in his ecstasy! Give me your hand, and let me feel your pulse. Ooh.
Here is my hand. Let it feel your ear.
Oh! I charge thee, Satan, housed within this man, to yield unto my holy prayers. And to thy state of darkness hie thee straight. Watcha! Watcha! I conjure thee by the spirits of the willow and all the ancient sprites and goblins of this land, of these ancient woods, begone from this man!
Peace, doting wizard! I'm not mad! Hey, 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 hey!
What a journey.
What a journey, Philip.
This is what theatre can be as well. It's not just in stuffy red seats in the dark. You get to actually be in a place that is somewhere that you know, but being shown in a completely different way. What's really exciting, thinking about the future, is what are the possibilities of plays in caves. They're kind of endless. You know, it's kind of looking at things that are potentially a bit dark, a bit underground, but also anything that's kind of beautiful and magical. This is what's so great about caves. They're very adaptable and can be used in so many different kinds of ways. I think the caves match the epic nature of Shakespeare. You know, when we talk about the natural world in Shakespeare's plays, we're suddenly surrounded by it. You know, there are lines all the way through Shakespeare's plays about the natural world, about rock, about stones, about things being cold and dark. And of course, suddenly you're in a cave and it is cold and it is dark. It's a very visceral experience for the audience.
Hello, my name is Tracy Irish. I am a practitioner, teacher and scholar working in the overlapping worlds of Shakespeare, education and theatre.
Hello, my name is Aileen Gonsalves. I'm Artistic Director of Butterfly Theatre. Butterfly have been performing promenade site-responsive Shakespeare productions in extraordinary spaces like caves, forests and castles for 10 years. I teach my Gonsalves method of acting in drama schools and universities, which is a method rooted in the work of Sanford Meisner, developed through my company working together. Tracy and I have worked together on a number of projects over the years. One we have to mention, because it's coming out the very day that you're watching this video, is that we have co-authored a book called Shakespeare and Meisner for the Arden Performance Shakespeare series, which we're very excited about and you can get from any bookshop near you.
But for this wonderfully conceived Globe for Globe symposium about Shakespeare and climate change, we want to focus on what you've just seen a little bit of in that short video clip, performing one particular play, Macbeth, in one very special set of caves, Kent's Cavern in Torquay. We're using the slight misquote in the title of this presentation, "Thy very stones prate of our whereabout," in two ways. As a reference to the resonance of Shakespeare's text as actors and audience move through the spaces of the caves, and Aileen will talk more about that, but also to the long history of telling stories in caves over millennia of natural climate change. The stones of Kent's Cavern have prated of the whereabouts of humans for possibly 500,000 years, with evidence of occupation by Homo heidelbergensis. The oldest evidence in the UK of our own human species, Homo sapiens, is a 42,000-year-old jawbone that was found in Kent's Cavern. And there is plenty of evidence in the caves that Neanderthals had already been occupying Kent's Cavern for tens of thousands of years before that. The more we learn about early humans, the more a clear picture is emerging of caves as places where hunter-gatherer communities would come together for protection and celebration and would share art, singing, music, dancing, painting, sculpture, jewelry, and undoubtedly storytelling. And quite possibly, Neanderthals and Homo sapiens shared the spaces of Kent's Cavern for the 2,000 years until Neanderthals died out. So butterfly shows in the caves are continuing our human need for storytelling, stretching back into prehistory, as actors and audiences connect with the underground natural environment and understand more about themselves as active elements in the ecosystems of both nature and human societies around them. Hearing Shakespeare's sensory language as part of the multisensory journey through the shapes, sounds, shadows, and smells of the cave is an affecting experience. The tropes of darkness and supernatural in Macbeth play particularly well to our sensory connections of physical dangers in dark corners and the psychological dangers of the dark recesses of our own minds. The shadows where night's black agents hang out and where imagined daggers and conjured apparitions can appear, and where darkness really has entombed the face of the earth.
The company name Butterfly and the tagline, "Everything is connected," derive from Lorenz's butterfly effect with its concept of the infinite possibilities in every moment. You know, a butterfly flaps its wings in Brazil, causing a tornado in Texas, cause and effect, or Meisner's famous, "You can't say ouch until you've been pinched." You know, acting is reacting. So we applied that principle to every area of the production. So we're responsive to each other, the audience, Shakespeare's text, the darkness, the light, you know, the atmosphere, the music, and all aspects of the environment, because it becomes something to respond to in that moment. And because it's promenade and the audience is sometimes, a foot away from us and they follow us around and they change position, each performance is as unique as the people in it and watching it. So each performance is a completely unique experience, and we hope an unforgettable one. Kent's Cavern is a circular labyrinth, so you can actually travel around it in a way that makes the audience feel really quite lost. And they're very dependent on that connection to the actors and characters to take them through it. But when those characters are witches or blood-soaked, it can be quite unnerving. You can subvert a lot of things when you are actually under the ground. We love the multivaried natural playing spaces. I mean, all the different levels and atmospheres that are created, they're inherently there. The claustrophobic space, and 1 minute, then you look round and there's a high vaulted ceiling. You turn your head and you're in a stalactite chamber, and there are all these glistening stalactites and stalagmites, and Banquo kind of shimmers into view. Or, there's suddenly a sheer drop to your side, and suddenly you see a tiny little candle and hear some scratching. You look down and Lady Macbeth's down there in the madness scene. Or there's a kind of long, dark, endless stone corridor disappearing into darkness, into nothing. And that's Duncan's chambers. Characters go up and down there. And, Macbeth emerges with his daggers, and Macduff emerges with horror. And it's terrifying as he comes out of this total darkness. You make very dramatic entrances. Witches, of course, are brilliant in caves. They're just endless, the possibilities. They hide in the shadows and they get camouflaged in the same colours as the costumes. We can make them the same. We often hear them before we see them. I once did a production where we plunged the audience into complete and utter darkness and then had the witches just sniffing around them. And that happened in the first 30 seconds of the play. And then when the lights started creeping up and these creatures were the ones that led them round, it was absolutely fascinating. We love to use light though as well. We can get to play around with the shadows. So we have these incredible shell fires, and they're made of scallop shells, and they're hollowed out scallop shells. And then these days we put moss in them and oil, but they would have had, they think, sort of moss and animal fat, and that's what would have lit them. But what they do is they cast so many weird shadows. I can't describe the shell fires. I think the video showed them for a bit, but they're so brilliant. And what's fantastic is they send off a kind of strange smell, which is very sort of otherworldly. Of course, our favourite thing is the bats. I mean, I love them. I played Lady Macbeth, and you do come, you spirits, and you look up and there are literally bats above your head. It's very thrilling, and the bats swoop around the caves at various points. And of course, so much of the play has references to evil that you can endlessly reference these bats that suddenly swoop around you as you're trying to speak. It's brilliant. Rocks, of course, big thing in caves. And so we have lines really ping out, thou sure and firm set earth, here not my steps, whole as the marble, founded as the rock. It gives Macbeth that absolute unassailable quality. He's surrounded by this fortress. And then, of course, darkness and light, the instruments of darkness, my black and deep desires. And there are no stars in caves, I'll tell you that much. The wonderful soundscapes that you can have, live singing becomes really effective, and it's fabulous because it's an unparalleled acoustic in there. So we do lots of things with sound. But silence, of course, is the other fascinating thing in a cave, because it goes into absolute silence. And you can really play with that in things like, tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow. And trees have been known to move and stones to speak. So it's great that, out brief candle is always one of our favourite lines, because we remember our first production where Nick actually spat out the one candle that we decided was enough to light a whole play in his speech. And suddenly the whole place was plunged into darkness. I had to crawl up and hand him a candle. The productions, of course, have been so popular with school productions. I mean, they come year after year. We've had them coming for 10 years now. Schools really love to come and see the shows because it's so exciting.
And so in 2018, we did a schools project. We were fortunate to get funding to work with teachers and students from 4 local primary schools in Torquay. We edited and divided Macbeth into 4 sections and the cave complex into 4 sections. And we then supported each school to create their own performance of their section of the play in their section of the cave, with coordination on design and transitions to create a coherent show for a public promenade performance. And the pupils loved working with Shakespeare, they loved playing in the caves, and they blossomed through the creative responsibility that they were given. They also learned a huge amount about Shakespeare and caves. But what we think they achieved was what we think of as the best of theatrical storytelling, the playful, collaborative responsiveness to the environment and being alive to the moment. So we're going to end with a very short taste of the result of that project. And please do visit Butterfly website for more.
But one word more! Macbeth, Macbeth, Macbeth. Cannot take the fear. What's the boy, Malcolm? To make them kings, the seed of Banquo kings. All hail Macbeth and Banquo, Banquo and Macbeth. All hail! Having the different people as Macbeth, it actually shows you, it sort of gives you that, oh, they've changed now, that, like, actually seeing them as a different person makes you feel like, oh, now does this person now represent, like, sadness?
Hear it not, Duncan, for it is a knell that summons thee to heaven or to